He only wanted his business to thrive. But the prosperity dagger from the old man sucked more than just money. It drained the soul of every customer who came. Rian's fried rice cart stood abandoned at the end of a quiet street, a monument to his failure in the industrial area that died after 9 p.m. The flickering neon light above his cart only attracted moths, not the customers he desperately needed. That day had been another disgrace where he only sold 3 portions, a depressing trend that had been going on for over 2 weeks. He felt the weight intensely. Overdue rent for his boarding room, unpaid electricity bills, and the shame every time he had to call his parents in the village to ask for help, all combining into a symphony of despair in his head. His gaze fixed on his competitor Bang Joni's cart at the other end of the street, which was still crowded with customers late into the night, and a bitter, helpless envy shrouded his heart like a thick fog. The night wind felt piercingly cold through his thin shirt, as if voicing whispers that his efforts were finished, and there was no use struggling anymore in this cruel big city. With a mechanical motion full of disappointment, his trembling hands wiped the leftover oil and rice crumbs from the large wok with a piece of greasy old newspaper. Every wipe felt like erasing the remnants of dreams and hopes he had naively woven when he first started this business. He imagined how proud his parents had been when he told them of his plan to start his own business, and how bitter the reality he now faced was. The images of his elderly, wrinkled parents, who always sent their prayers and their last savings, haunted his thoughts incessantly and added to the already unbearable burden of guilt, making him want to cry. The occasional honking of cars on the main road felt like loud mockeries, reminding him that life in this big city kept moving, indifferent to his pitiful drama of sorrow and failure. He decided that tomorrow would be his last day of selling, a decision that felt like a total defeat and surrender to a fate he deemed cruel, before finally returning home empty-handed and admitting this failure to his parents. Suddenly, without any warning, a long, distorted shadow fell over his cart, startling him and making his heart race. For a moment, a false hope flared in his chest, thinking a last-minute customer had arrived. However, that hope immediately died and was replaced with a feeling of dread and discomfort when he saw the stranger standing there. An elderly man with a very hunched posture, dressed simply but neatly, his face full of deep wrinkles, and most strikingly, his eyes looked ancient, cloudy, yet seemingly able to penetrate directly into his soul and thoughts. The old man didn't utter a single word, just stood silently with a simple wooden stick in his hand while staring at Rian's fried rice cart with an unreadable expression, as if judging something far deeper than just the merchandise or his simple cooking equipment. Rian felt slightly scared and wary, wondering what this mysterious old man truly wanted at such a late hour in this secluded place. Was he a beggar, or perhaps a senile old man who had gotten lost? "Confused why your business is quiet, son?" The old man's voice finally came out, hoarse yet clear, piercing the near-perfect night silence around them. His question sounded simple, but was uttered with a tone as if he already knew exactly all the problems and pain Rian was currently experiencing. Rian could only nod weakly, unable to believe that a complete stranger could so accurately touch the sorest point in his life right now. It felt like a forced confession of sin. "It's been like a graveyard for over a week, Grandpa," he lamented, releasing the burden he had been carrying alone to an unknown person. There was a strange relief in saying it out loud. The old man, whom he then addressed as Grandpa, then pulled out a long object wrapped in worn, faded white cloth from behind his clothes. With very careful and respectful movements, he unwrapped it, revealing an ancient dagger with a sheath that was very dull, rusty, and covered in almost illegible carvings. "Hang this on your cart," ordered Mba Kromo, his voice suddenly full of authority, seemingly undeniable. "It will bring you customers, many customers." Rian was still very doubtful and confused, his eyes darting back and forth between the seemingly worthless ancient dagger and the mysterious old face before him. His common sense screamed that this was nonsense, an ancient superstition that wouldn't solve his real problems. "A dagger? What for, Grandpa? I need customers who buy fried rice, not an antique heirloom," he protested, yet strangely, his hand was already reaching for the dagger. The object felt strangely cold, not like ordinary iron, even in the already cold night air. Mba Kromo smiled thinly, an expression that didn't reach his cloudy, deep eyes. "A business charm. Trust me, son. But remember one thing," he emphasized, his wrinkled, slightly trembling index finger pointing intensely at Rian. "Never, ever draw it from its sheath. Let it work in its own way. Your prosperity will come soon, more than you can imagine." Before Rian could open his mouth to ask further or refuse this strange gift, Mba Kromo had already turned around with surprising speed and agility for his age and disappeared into the darkness of the night, as if swallowed by the shadows of the empty streets, leaving Rian in a state of confusion while tightly holding the ancient dagger full of puzzles that felt increasingly heavy in his hand. The next day, feeling both skeptical and intrigued by the mysterious old man's promise, Rian decided to hang the ancient dagger in the corner of his cart, right next to where he usually hung his wooden spatula and metal turner. The heirloom looked completely out of place and slightly sinister among the greasy cooking utensils, as if it carried an aura from another era that clashed with the inviting and friendly image a street food stall should have. He let out a long sigh, trying to dismiss the doubts creeping into his mind, while promising himself that this was his final day of selling. If the dagger turned out to be nonsense and his business remained as quiet as usual, he would give up and return his old cart. The morning passed slowly and ordinarily, with only a few regular customers buying their usual portions, and Rian grew increasingly convinced that the ancient dagger was just a joke played by a senile old man, or perhaps even a nightmare he had experienced due to mental pressure. However, everything began to change drastically once the sun grew hot overhead. A housewife who usually only bought 1 pack of fried rice suddenly ordered 5 packs to take away, for no clear reason. By afternoon, a small miracle began to unfold before his disbelieving eyes. His cart, usually quiet, now began to be visited by customers he had never seen before, people with new faces queuing patiently even though Rian was working alone. It felt like a waking dream as he watched the queue grow longer, something that had never happened since he first started his fried rice business. His skilled hands never stopped stirring, flipping, and seasoning the rice in the large wok, yet his mind wandered to the ancient dagger quietly hanging in the corner. Every time a new customer approached, his eyes unconsciously glanced toward the dagger, as if trying to find a connection between the heirloom and the sudden increase in buyers. There was an indescribable strange feeling, a chilling sensation tingling down his spine every time he glanced at the dagger, as if the object was alive and observing his every move and every transaction. Although his business was thriving and money piled up in the cash drawer, a subtle unease began to nest in his heart, because this luck came too quickly and too easily, like an unsolicited gift from an unknown source. As night fell, the miracle turned into something almost unbelievable. His cart wasn't just busy, but was truly swarmed by an eager crowd, creating a scene that contrasted sharply with the loneliness of previous nights. The noisy chatter of buyers, the clinking of coins, and the rustling of banknotes filled his ears, creating a symphony that he had always dreamed of, but now felt alien and slightly frightening. Amid the crowd, a middle-aged woman with a slightly shabby appearance and a pale face, whom he later knew as Ibu Siti, approached his cart with slow, hesitant steps, as if she didn't truly want to be there. "One special fried rice, ma'am?" Rian greeted loudly, trying to cover his fatigue with a wide smile, while his hands quickly prepared the next order in the wok that almost never stopped smoking. Ibu Siti nodded weakly, her eyes empty and dazed, and when Rian handed over her pack of fried rice, their fingers touched briefly, and he felt a strangely cold touch, unlike normal body temperature. "Your fried rice is very delicious, son," Ibu Siti murmured in a voice almost like a whisper, yet her facial expression didn't reflect satisfaction, but rather a deep, unspoken anguish. "But why have I been frequently dreaming of being watched by a black shadow since buying here yesterday?" she complained, looking at Rian with a pleading gaze, as if she believed he had the answer to the strange problem she was experiencing. Rian felt his chest tighten, a sudden and unsubstantiated feeling of guilt enveloping him. He forced a thin smile and answered in a voice trying to sound calm. "Maybe you're overthinking, ma'am. Get enough rest. It will go away." Ibu Siti only nodded slowly, but her still questioning gaze made Rian feel increasingly uncomfortable, and he quickly served the next customer to avoid further conversation. As Ibu Siti turned and walked away, Rian's eyes accidentally focused on her shadow under the dim streetlight, and for a brief yet terrifying moment, he saw a faint silhouette of black smoke loosely detach from Ibu Siti's shoulder and seemed drawn toward the dagger on his cart, disappearing as soon as it touched the heirloom. Rian's heart raced, and he rubbed his eyes, convinced it was just a trick of light and shadow due to extreme fatigue after a hard day's work. The crowd finally subsided around midnight, leaving Rian alone amidst the chaos of his messy cart, but with a cash drawer full of money, an achievement that should have made him cheer with joy. Instead, a feeling of emptiness and deep apprehension gnawed at his soul. He sat on his small chair, staring at the seemingly ordinary ancient dagger, trying to understand what had truly happened today. His luck had come too suddenly, too intensely, and was accompanied by Ibu Siti's strange question and the disturbing hallucination of black smoke. He reached out his hand, almost touching the carved dagger hilt, wanting to reassure himself that the object was nothing more than a powerless piece of old iron. However, just before his finger touched it, an unnatural cold dew enveloped his skin, and he quickly pulled his hand back, irrational fear coursing through his entire body. That night, for the first time, Rian went home with pockets full of money, but also with a heart filled with big questions and a bad premonition that his agreement with Mba Chromo might have a price far more expensive than he had ever imagined. 3 days had passed since the dagger was hung, and Rian's life had completely transformed, as if a dream had come true. Yet that dream was beginning to feel like a nightmare disguised in luxury. His cart was now the center of unceasing commotion, with queues snaking all the way to the main road. A sight he could only dream of before, but now found deeply unsettling. Every customer who bought his fried rice seemed unable to resist a mysterious attraction emanating from his simple cart. And Rian began noticing a strange, consistent pattern behind this frenzy. Many of the new customers, especially those who came at night, shared the same characteristics: dazed, lethargic eyes, unnaturally pale skin, and an indifferent attitude, as if they weren't fully there of their own will. Some even moved like sleepwalkers, accepting their packets of fried rice with slow, expressionless gestures before leaving without uttering a single word, leaving behind an unpleasant impression in Rian's mind. Amid his overwhelming busyness, Rian started hearing odd complaints from some of his regular customers who had never complained before. A middle-aged man who usually bought fried rice every night grumbled that since becoming a loyal customer, he felt increasingly weak and frequently dizzy for no apparent reason, despite having been perfectly healthy before. A young mother with a baby in her arms shared that her infant had become fussy every time they passed Rian's fried rice cart, as if the baby could see something adults couldn't. Each complaint was delivered in hushed tones and with vacant stares, as if these customers weren't fully aware of what they were saying, like puppets controlled by invisible strings. Rian could only offer stiff smiles and nods, unsure how to respond, while his guilt grew with every complaint he heard, because in his heart he was beginning to suspect the ancient dagger was the root cause of all these strange changes. That night, as the crowd of customers began to thin, a young man his age with a pale face and dark circles under his eyes approached his cart with unsteady steps. "Fried rice, just one packet," the young man rasped, his hand trembling as he held out payment. Rian quickly prepared his order, and as he handed over the packet, he once again felt that unnaturally cold touch, just like when he had touched Ibu Siti days before. "Bro, are you okay?" Rian asked with concern, steadying the young man who seemed about to collapse. The young man slowly lifted his head, and for a split second their eyes met. Rian saw something that made his blood run cold. Reflected in the man's pupils, he saw the same shadowy black smoke he had seen with Ibu Siti, dancing and flickering like black flames. I'm fine," the young man replied in a hollow voice before turning and stumbling away, leaving Rian shocked and terrified. After the incident with the young man, Rian decided to close early, claiming he had run out of ingredients, even though he still had enough supplies to serve dozens of waiting customers. He needed time to think, to process everything that had happened over the past few days. Because the longer this went on, the clearer it became that his fortune came at a price no amount of money could pay. Once his cart was empty and he began cleaning the equipment, his eyes remained fixed on the ancient dagger hanging quietly in the corner, as if the object were completely innocent of the strange occurrences. In his solitude, he noticed something he had never realized before. The dagger seemed to be changing.
The rust that had previously covered its surface was receding in certain areas, revealing dark metal underneath that appeared to pulse faintly, as if something living within it was breathing. With a mix of fear and curiosity, Rian slowly approached the dagger, this time intending to examine it more closely, to find answers to all the questions troubling his mind. His trembling hand reached for the dagger's hilt, and this time he didn't pull back when he felt the cold aura radiating from the heirloom. His fingers touched the carvings on the hilt, and instantly a brief yet clear image flashed through his mind. The faces of his pale, listless customers, with wispy silver smoke flowing from their mouths and being sucked toward the dagger. The image was accompanied by an intense thirst, a hunger that didn't originate from his own stomach, but from something else, something hiding within the dagger. Rian yanked his hand back violently, his body breaking into a cold sweat. And now he was certain the dagger wasn't just an inanimate object, and Mba Chromo was no ordinary human. He had entered into a pact with something dark, and every packet of fried rice he sold might have become a tool to take something precious from his customers, something he couldn't even comprehend. That night, Rian went home with heavy steps, carrying both the ancient dagger and a difficult decision he had to make: to continue his tainted fortune, or to return everything, no matter the consequences.
Fueled by a desperate need for answers, Rian made a reckless decision. Instead of opening his cart the next evening, he concealed the dagger in his backpack and set out to find Mba Chromo. He retraced the path to where they first met, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. The industrial area felt even more desolate than usual, the silence broken only by the whisper of the wind and the frantic beating of his own heart. After what felt like an eternity of searching, he spotted a faint, flickering light deep within a narrow, forgotten alleyway, a place he had always instinctively avoided. Creeping closer, he peered into the dimly lit interior of a dilapidated warehouse. The sight that greeted him made his blood run cold. Mba Chromo was there, but the frail old man was gone. In his place stood a tall, imposing figure with skin the color of cooled ash and eyes that glowed with a malevolent amber light. The air around him shimmered with heat, and the rusty Karis daggers that lined the walls of the warehouse pulsed with a dark, rhythmic energy. This was no benevolent spirit. It was a djinn, a creature of smoke and fire, and it was using the Karis as anchors to siphon the life force of his customers. Before Rian could retreat, the djinn's head snapped in his direction. A cruel smile stretched across its features. "Ah, the little merchant, come to thank your benefactor?" Its voice echoed, not in the air, but directly inside Rian's mind. Paralyzed with terror, Rian could only watch as the creature gestured, and the backpack containing the Karis flew from his shoulders into its waiting hand. "You have done well," the djinn purred, stroking the dagger. "Their vitality is exquisite, and you have been rewarded handsomely, have you not? The wealth, the success you craved. Finding his voice, Rian stammered, What are you doing to them? I never agreed to this." The djinn laughed, a sound like cracking stone. "You accepted the gift. You hung the keris. Your desire for prosperity was agreement enough. Every transaction, every packet of fried rice sold was a seal on our contract. You are the conduit, and their life energy is the currency." It leaned in, its fiery eyes boring into Rian's soul. "The choice is still yours, little merchant. Continue to thrive, or break the contract and watch your world crumble. But know this, if you choose the latter, the energy I've already taken will be lost forever, leaving your customers as hollow shells. Their fate and your conscience will be yours to bear." With a final mocking smirk, the djinn and its warehouse of horrors seemed to dissolve into smoke, leaving Rian alone in the dark alley, the weight of his damned prosperity crushing him. The walk home was a blur of terror and self-loathing. The city lights, once symbols of opportunity, now seemed like accusing eyes. Every person he passed on the street became a potential victim in his mind. Was that woman slightly too pale? Did that man move with a hint of lethargy? The weight of the dagger in his backpack felt like a leaden sin, its presence a constant, cold reminder of the terrible bargain he had unknowingly struck. He locked the door of his small rented room and sank to the floor. The image of the djinn's smoldering eyes burned into his mind. The money he had earned, once a source of pride, now felt like blood money, tainted with the stolen vitality of his fellow human beings. Sleep was impossible. His mind raced, replaying every interaction, every complaint. Ibu Siti's tired eyes, the young office worker's cold hand, Pakhendra's collapse. They were not coincidences. They were symptoms. He was a poison, spreading misery disguised as a delicious meal. He thought of his parents in the village, their simple dreams of his success. What would they say if they knew the cost of his prosperity? He pulled the keris from his backpack, no longer seeing an antique, but a vile parasite. The metal was now almost entirely free of rust, the patterns on the blade writhing like trapped serpents in the moonlight filtering through his window. He felt a faint, insidious pull from it, a whisper in his blood promising more wealth, more success, if he would just continue. The next morning, haggard and trembling, he made a decision. He could not open his cart. He could not feed the djinn another soul. But as he sat in the silence of his room, a new, more chilling realization dawned. The connection forged by the keris wasn't just one way. He could feel a faint, ghostly network of threads, thin, cold lines of energy stretching out from the dagger, connecting him to every customer who had eaten from his cart since he hung the keris. He could feel their collective weariness, a low hum of stolen life. Breaking the contract wouldn't just return him to poverty,
It would sever these threads, potentially causing irreversible harm to the people he had already harmed. The jinn's words echoed in his mind, hollow shells. He was trapped. To continue was damnation. To stop might be a death sentence for others.
Driven by desperation and a gnawing guilt, Rian embarked on a frantic search for a solution. He avoided his usual spots, fearing the jinn's influence, and instead sought out the city's hidden places of knowledge. He visited dusty old bookstores, their shelves crammed with forgotten lore, and sought out elderly spiritual practitioners in quiet neighborhoods. Most dismissed him, some with fear in their eyes when he cautiously mentioned a powerful carice. His story of a cursed family heirloom was met with skepticism and warnings to leave well enough alone. The modern city, he discovered, had largely forgotten the old ways, the specific knowledge needed to break a jinn's contract. One rainy afternoon, in the farthest corner of a labyrinthine antique market, he found a glimmer of hope. An very old woman, her eyes clouded with cataracts, but her presence radiating a sharp awareness, ran a stall selling herbs and talismans. As Rian approached, her milky eyes seemed to fix on the backpack containing the carice. "You carry a great heat, boy," she croaked before he could speak. "A fire that does not warm, but consumes." Startled, Rian confessed everything. The old man, the carice, the booming business, the jinn's revelation, and the terrible connection he felt to his customers. The woman, who called herself Nenek Kebo, listened in silence, her wrinkled face grave. When he finished, she let out a long, weary sigh. "This is a jinn of greed, a subtle and vicious creature. It feeds on desire. Your desire for success was its gateway." She explained that simply discarding the carice would not break the contract. It would only anger the jinn, which might then directly claim the lives it had been siphoning. "The threads you feel are real. They are tethers of life force. To sever them carelessly is to spill the blood it carries." Rian's heart sank. But then Nenek Kebo leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There is one way, a ritual of severance. It is dangerous, for you must confront the jinn directly, not in its warehouse, but in the spiritual realm where the contract is bound. You must use the carice itself, the anchor of the bond, to cut the threads from your end." She warned him that the jinn would fight back with every weapon at its disposal: illusions, promises, and terror. His own lingering desire for wealth would be his greatest weakness. You must truly, in your heart, renounce the prosperity it gave you. You must be willing to return to nothing, to embrace the failure you once feared, for the sake of those you wronged. Only a pure, selfless intent can turn its own anchor against it. She gave him a small woven bracelet of black and white threads. "This will not protect you, but it will help you hold on to your niyat, your intention. The ritual must be performed at the new moon, when its power over the physical world is weakest. You have 3 days." Leaving the market, Rian felt a terrifying clarity. The path was set.
he had to willingly walk back into the nightmare, armed with nothing but a desperate wish for redemption.
The 3 days until the new moon were an agonizing countdown. Rian followed Nenek Kebo's cryptic instructions, gathering rare ingredients from specific markets at precise times. White flowers that bloomed only at midnight, ash from a lightning-struck tree, and water collected from 7 different wells. He fasted and meditated, not for spiritual clarity, but to starve the part of himself that still whispered of wealth and easy success. The curse, now kept wrapped in white cloth, seemed to sense his intent. It grew cold to the touch, and in the quiet of his room he could hear it, a faint, angry hum like a trapped wasp. The bracelet on his wrist felt flimsy, a ridiculous defense against the monstrous entity he was preparing to face. On the night of the new moon, the city was plunged into a profound darkness. Rian stood in the center of his small room, having drawn a complex circular diagram on the floor with the ash and crushed flowers. A single bowl of the mixed well water sat in the center. His hands shook as he unwrapped the cuirass. Its blade was now a polished, menacing black, the runes glowing with a faint, bloody light. Taking a deep breath, he held the dagger over the bowl of water and began to chant the words Nenek Kebo had taught him, words that felt alien and heavy on his tongue. The air in the room grew thick and still, the hum from the cuirass rising to a piercing whine. Suddenly, the room vanished. Rian was no longer in his kontrakan, but standing in a vast, shadowy plain under a starless sky. Before him stood the djinn in its true form, a towering pillar of smoke and ember, its eyes 2 raging infernos. The psychic assault was immediate. "Fool!" its voice boomed, not in his ears, but in his very soul. "You would throw away everything I gave you. Look!" Illusions materialized around him. He saw himself in a fine suit, stepping out of a luxury car, his parents weeping with joy. He saw his cart transformed into a gleaming restaurant, packed with happy, healthy-looking customers. The visions were intoxicating, a siren song of everything he had ever wanted. The desire he thought he had starved roared back to life. Gritting his teeth, Rian focused on the feeling of the woven bracelet against his skin, on the memory of Ibusiti's pale, suffering face. "It's a lie!" he screamed into the void. "Their health for my wealth. I reject it." He focused his will on the cuirass he still held in this spiritual realm, and with a cry that tore from the depths of his being, he slashed it not at the djinn, but at the countless glittering threads of light that stretched from the dagger into the darkness, the tethers to his customers. A shriek of pure, undiluted rage erupted from the djinn as each thread snapped, releasing bursts of silvery energy that flowed back into the darkness. The act was excruciating. It felt like he was cutting away parts of his own life force, his own vitality. The luxurious illusions shattered like glass. The djinn lunged at him, its form dissolving into a scorching sandstorm of hatred. "Fool!" its voice boomed,
not in his ears, but in his very soul. You will burn for this, mortal. I will haunt your bloodline. Your failure will be eternal. But as it reached for him, its form began to flicker and fade. With the threads of its sustenance severed, its power in this realm was dissolving. The last thing Rian saw were those furious, fire-filled eyes, promising eternal vengeance, before the spiritual plane collapsed around him. He gasped, stumbling back into his physical body, collapsing onto the floor of his room. The cuirass lay beside him, its blade now dull, gray, and inert, like a piece of common dead iron. It was over. He was free. But as he lay there, exhausted and emptied, he knew the djinn's final threat was not an illusion. The consequences of his bargain were over, but the scars remained.
The dawn, after the ritual, brought no sense of triumph, only a profound and bone-deep exhaustion. Rian lay on the floor for a long time, watching the gray morning light filter into his room, feeling as hollow as the now lifeless cuirass beside him. The frantic energy that had sustained him was gone, replaced by a quiet, unsettling stillness. When he finally stirred, his body ached as if he had fought a physical battle. He picked up the cuirass. It was cold, heavy, and utterly inert, just a piece of old metal. The malevolent presence that had pulsed within it was gone, but so was the unnatural vitality it had lent his business. He wrapped it in the white cloth once more, a shroud for a dead thing, and hid it at the bottom of a locked trunk. Later that day, driven by a desperate need for confirmation, he opened his cart for the first time since the confrontation. The difference was immediate and stark. The invisible pull that had once drawn customers in relentless waves was gone. The street returned to its normal, sparse traffic. A few of his regulars came, but the queues were gone, the frantic energy absent. He saw Ibu Siti in the distance, walking with a straighter posture, her step lighter. She didn't even glance at his cart. A profound relief washed over him, so intense it brought tears to his eyes. The threads were cut. They were free. But his own predicament was just beginning. Without the cuirass's influence, his fried rice was just ordinary. The magical allure had vanished. Sales plummeted, returning to the grim numbers of his pre-cuirass days. But now the memory of his fleeting prosperity made the failure taste even more bitter. The money he had saved began to dwindle rapidly, paying back the debts his success had allowed him to ignore. The fear the djinn had preyed upon, the fear of failure, was now his reality again. But it felt different. It was a clean fear, a human struggle, untainted by the supernatural. It was his to bear alone. A week after the ritual, Nenek Kabo visited his cart. She bought a packet of fried rice, ate it slowly, and nodded. "The taste is honest now," she said simply. "The shadow is gone from the food." She looked at him, her old eyes seeing everything. "The djinn is banished from this contract,
but its kind does not forget a slight. You have made a powerful enemy in a realm you do not understand. Live your life, but live it wisely, and be watchful of shadows that linger too long. She left him with those ominous words and a small woven bag of protective herbs. Rian was left with his quiet cart, his empty pockets, and the chilling knowledge that, while he had saved others, he might have irrevocably cursed himself. The victory was real, but it felt fragile, and the cost of his redemption was a life lived looking over his shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop from a world he could no longer see.
A month passed. Ryan's cart was once again a quiet fixture on the street corner, no longer a vortex of unnatural activity, but a simple, struggling business. The memory of his fleeting, damned prosperity was like a fever dream, its intensity fading, but leaving behind a permanent chill. He learned to appreciate the small, genuine victories. A regular customer who complimented his improved, honest cooking. The satisfaction of paying a bill with hard-earned, clean money. The simple peace of a slow evening without the gnawing dread of what his success was costing others. The fear of the djinn's return was a constant, low hum in the background, a shadow he had learned to live with, much like his renewed financial struggles. One evening, as he was preparing to close, a familiar figure approached. It was Ibu City. She looked years younger, her eyes bright and her skin having lost its sickly pallor. She placed an order, and as he cooked, she said, "You know, it's strange. For weeks I felt like I was drowning in fog. I was always tired, always scared. Then, almost exactly a month ago, it just lifted." She accepted the packet of fried rice, her hand warm and firm when their fingers brushed. No coldness, no spectral smoke. "I don't know what changed, but thank you. Your food tastes different now. It tastes safe." Her words settled in his heart, warmer than any pile of cash from his days of cursed fortune. This was a different kind of wealth, one that couldn't be measured in rupiah, but in the light returning to a person's eyes. He watched her walk away, a healthy, vibrant woman, and the last knot of guilt in his chest began to loosen. He had not emerged from his ordeal unscathed. He was poorer, carried the scar of a supernatural enemy, and was haunted by his past mistakes. But as he wheeled his quiet cart home under the vast starry sky, he felt a peace he had never known during his days of unnatural success. He had chosen humanity over hollow fortune, and in the quiet, honest struggle of his new life, he had found a prosperity that no djinn could ever give or take away. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was his own, and he would walk it with a clean conscience.